Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of our existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Please rise for the hymn.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, as the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, call the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's songs. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
So, well, whoa, can you, good? Can you hear me? No? No? What about now? Nothing? All right, so we're going to have some discussions about technical stuff, which is, I did not turn on the microphone. So welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. Reverend Chris is in Cedar, your other minister's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa right now, installing another minister. So we're running out of ministers to install. He's coming back next week. Well, actually, he's coming back this week. But we have a lot going on. So, Cappy, if you would come up just while I do the other announcement so I won't run through it. First of all, if you're a visitor, we're glad you're here. We do not ask you for blood every week. That's a twice-a-year event. But if you do have blood that you wish someone else had, this is your Sunday. This is your Sunday to offer it. Online people, there's a blood mobile out here. We do it twice a year. And if we get enough people who donate, we get named the most outstanding Unitarian church in Baton Rouge, which is great because we're the only one. The things for you to know. Blood drive is going on. During middle hour, we have storytelling with Leslie. Leslie, are you still doing storytelling and art? Yes, storytelling and art. We have a social justice sub-team on voting. And we're going to have a discussion of financial planning, and we'll hear more about that during the offering. Next week, and then we're going to do auction. Next week is, we're going to do a plant sale, and we're going to have all of these birdhouses up here and the ones out there. If you bought a birdhouse, brought it back, brought it home, decorated it, and brought it back, we're going to find some way to sell or auction those off next week. If you have plants you want to sell, you can bring them on Saturday. And then we will sell those also Sunday. think that's all. Cappy, is there a big event coming up?
I'm not sure. Can I use this one? Yeah, please. There is a big event coming on. We have lots of things for sale, I know, every weekend, so we ask y'all to save some of your energy for the auction, which is coming the following week. We are 13 days away from the auction. We are very excited about that. We wanted y'all to know a couple of things. Some Suzanne covered last week, but we just wanted to remind y'all. One bill will get you in. Doesn't matter what bill, 1, 5, 10, 50, 100. I don't know if there's a $1,000 bill, but I would take it if there was. But one bill, any bill, will get you in. So make sure and bring some friends and some family, chosen or otherwise. We're happy to have them. We do know that there's a lot of things going on that weekend. We have graduations, we have family affairs, so we are sensitive to that and hope that you will consider bringing them as well. We have all levels of participation, so y'all know we've been really trying to be very intentional with the things that we are auctioning because it's our green year again. So we are eco-friendly and earth-friendly and really thinking about sustainability. And we also are really sensitive to the fact that people participate at different levels. So it really does not matter your circumstances. There will be food, there will be fun, there will be community, and plenty of things to bid on, engage with, and have fun with. Our donations are actually due today, but that was like a really, what's the word when you're ambitious? It was a very ambitious idea. So they are still coming in. We appreciate that. We had some come in last night. I'm sure we would take a couple of more, but we will cut it off hard next week so that we can get everything ready for the actual event. And we are still looking for some volunteers on the night of. So let us know. We'll be at the table in between. And we look forward to seeing y'all there. Thanks.
There's so much more going on in the church, but let's leave it there because it's going to be hard to hear all of the announcements. Yeah, see, that's why I'm going to have one during the offering.
That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome."
I wanted to give you a little taste of that. I invite you now into our morning prayer and reflection. The God that we know and we see love and hope and kindness, whatever that mystery is that keeps us going, be with us on this day. And hold all of those who are mourning the loss of a loved one, family, or friend, maybe the loss of a relationship. Hold all of those who are watching protests all over this country and are seeing a militarized police response and are worrying about freedom of assembly, worrying about how we can bring about a better world. Hold all those who just long to make it through the day, who just want to be back with their family or their friends. Hold all those who wish for a world more united. May you know the world is better because you are here. Amen. We have a ritual each week that we do where we invite you up, whether you're a visitor or a member. Come forward either along the west or the east wall. Take a stone. Let it represent whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, whatever you're working through, and place it in the chalice bowl. Also, after the service, we'll have cards for people to sign for church members who are going through some significant life events. Online people, I invite you to type the stone right into the chat. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is the symbol of the power of love.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
So if you need to leave early or just want to know the point of this service real quickly, I'll tell you a brief story that has a little warning embedded in it, and then you can keep going about your day. About 2 years into my ministry here, I was meeting with a couple of leaders of our branches group, a small group ministry program. You see, there's a problem when you join a church. Whatever name you tell people when you join is the name they're going to keep calling you. And you might wind up being stuck with that name for a long time. This one branches leader was stuck with a nickname that he did not want. Because I was still new enough to be able to ask questions bluntly, I said, I've heard different things. Do you want us to call you by, let's say, John? Or do you want us to call you Jonathan? And he said he never liked being called John, but everyone at church does it. His preferred name is Jonathan. The other branches leader, a woman who is known for her spiritual maturity in this church, looked him in the eyes and said, if you tell me to call you a name, that's the name I call you. It's just that simple. There you go. Total summation of this service, which I am calling Call My Name. But because you pay me by the hour, I think, let's spend a little more time getting there. For those of you unfamiliar with the biblical story of Jacob wrestling with God, let's unpack it a little bit. Jacob is wandering, as the Hebrews were wont to do back in the day. He had left all of his family and things behind, or more technically, he had sent them ahead of him. But at this point in the story, he is completely alone. And he saw a man. Some interpretations claim this man is God, and other interpretations say it was an angel, but it is unclear. He wrestles with this man until eventually he gets injured in his hip. When the sun rises, when the next day comes, the person Jacob wrestled with all night, he says, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. There are very clear Jewish interpretations of that story that I'm not going to go into, because that is not the faith that I come out of. There are also very Christian interpretations that I'm not going to go into, because I was raised Unitarian Universalist, and this is the faith that I'm choosing to interpret it. So as a Unitarian Universalist, I see God as that view as that thing that pulls us towards love. That thing that we wrestle with when we see a world so desperately wishing for more justice. God is whatever that thing is that pulls us into beloved community even when we don't want it. God is that thing that tells you to be the person you are supposed to be, even if it costs you family and friends. In my reading of this story, all of us are asked to wrestle with the big questions. All of us are asked to become theologians and engage with complexity and with the complexity and the beauty of this life. And sometimes when you finish that wrestling, you are a changed person and you have a new name. So today, we are going to explore what to call your ministers, what to do when someone tells you they've changed their name, and how we can wrestle with our own understandings of life. And because apparently I'm not very good at it, that was the transition I decided to give for introducing the offering. Aaron, if you want to come up, we're going to share this offering with the Louisiana Environmental Action Network. This is our last Sunday to share it because all of April, half of the offering goes to us, half goes to them. So if you really love Lean, they do some great advocacy work. Go ahead and give a lot of money to the offering. If you really do not love Lean, give a whole lot of money to the offering, but write little notes on all of the dollar bills about why you don't like them. We also, one of the things we're doing as a part of the generosity team is we do not want in this church for your experience of the church to be that we just ask you for money. As is evidenced by us having a plant sale next week and an auction the week after. But one of the things we want to do is to make it so that every person in this church has access to as much financial security as is possible. So Aaron, here, take the pulpit. Okay. I'll go over here. Aaron, as one of the members of the generosity, the education portion of the generosity team.
Yes.
There is online people. Sorry, you're just going to have to stick with us for this part because I don't think you could make it for this. But go ahead. What's coming up?
So we have a workshop today in the office during middle hour to discuss how to find a financial planner. So we had a household budgeting workshop maybe a month ago, well, probably 2 months ago, and did another one a month ago. A number of people at that realized it would be useful to have somebody else outside their family help them offer advice about the best way to save, to invest, to recover if you're in debt, etc. Financial planners do that, and this is a workshop designed to help people figure out how to find them. That is, where do you find them? What questions do you ask them? What do they do? How do they get paid? And we're not financial planners, so we can be totally transparent about the most effective ways for you all to find somebody who can help you manage your household budget, long-term kind of big picture budget stuff, like saving for college or buying a new car or financing a home.
So this sounds like a rich people problem. I, as someone who have always been a five-figure earner, thank you very much, am now super rich that I have five figures. If I don't have a whole lot of money, should I still come and listen?
You should still come. It's not a rich
Not
person.
should, but yeah.
It would be useful. That is, everybody needs, I think, anyway, all of us can use help in learning how to manage our money, and that's the job of a financial planner. So it doesn't matter how much you have or how much you plan to have. The value here is having somebody outside your family and outside your friend network who can give you honest and reliable advice about the various ways to keep those five figures and maybe do better.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that last part is the way that wealth stays with the wealthy is by not talking about it. And I just want to name that our church is trying to make it so that everyone has access to this. And with that, I will ask you to give very generously as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received.
Call me Reverend Sweetie. My contention is that ministers of color should insist on being called Reverend for a variety of reasons. First, we have earned that title. It takes a fair amount of time, no small amount of money, and a long process of discernment to attain the title of Reverend within Unitarian Universalism. We just didn't sign on to the internet and pay $25. We went through an arduous process that made many of us question whether this was indeed the right faith for us. We are called to take as our own history of a people who are not our own people. We are called to understand cultures that are not ours and to learn to navigate well these cultural differences. The path to ordination is harder for most of us than for our white colleagues, and it's hard enough for them. We should use the title because we have earned it. Ministers of color should insist on the title Reverend to get people accustomed to using the term so that when they are in the larger community, it is not something they have to think about. While it may be the custom in many UU congregations to call ministers by their first names, that is not true in all faith communities. Calling one's minister by their first name is seen by many outside of UU tradition as disrespectful. For ministers of color to be called by our first names by white congregants is seen as especially disrespectful and undermines our authority in the larger community. Acclimating congregants to calling us Reverend helps them avoid situations where they would be seen as disrespecting us and, by extension, all clergy. And it helps us avoid the embarrassment of seeming to be disrespected. Ministers of color, by virtue of our divergence from the cultural standards of ministers as white, straight, and male, must use all the tools available to us to establish our authority in our congregations. One of the more important tools we have is the power of the office of minister. And we claim that power by claiming the title of Reverend. To many white people in our congregations, it may seem like a matter of semantics, but it is not. Language matters, and how we use the language matters greatly. Words are the primary tool of the ministry, just as the tools we use in worship, in conversations with congregants, and in meetings are important. So too are the words we use to describe ourselves as ministers.
Let me give you all a little behind the scenes right now. The volunteer in the sound booth, this is more online people than you in person. The volunteer in the sound booth is, the video switcher has asked for a reset. So I don't know, streaming people, if you're able to see this or it's just black screen or not, but we're going to keep going. We'll do the whole thing live again if we need to. All right. Good luck, Brian. When I was a chaplain in a hospital during seminary, we were encouraged to experiment with our ministerial identity. I was at Parkland Hospital in Dallas. It's a large Trauma 1 hospital. We had people air flighted in from all over North Texas and even parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas. That's also the hospital that JFK went to after he was assassinated. My cohort was one rabbinic student, a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, a Franciscan friar, and a Jesuit priest in training. As is the case in seminary, many of my colleagues were trying on different costumes of ministry. The church I worked for at the time required clergy to wear robes on a Sunday, and I didn't have one yet, so I bought a robe. Also, side note, I bought a very bulky, very plasticky garbage bag feeling robe, which is great if you're not having to do weddings in southern Louisiana outside. So I now own a non-plastic robe, but I digress. A number of colleagues, especially women, would often wear a collar. That's the little tab you'll see, like Catholic priests especially will wear. They did it because often people would constantly question their authority. Wearing collars told people tells people who you are out in public. Well, one night I decided I would try wearing one of the collars. I didn't own one, so the Lutheran colleague of mine had one, and she let me use it. And I put it on one evening as I started doing my rounds. It felt like every room that I walked into, and remember this being Dallas, it had a large Hispanic Catholic population, but every room I would walk into, the first thing someone would say to me is, "Hi, Father," and then they would usually follow that up with a very specific Catholic request that could only come from a priest. So like a last rites or a confession, something that was very key to them experiencing their religious expression. And so the first thing that I would say to almost every person was no, and then a clarification about who I was and what I believed. I did not want my relationship with people to start with the words no and clarification. And I have not worn a collar since then to this day. Most of my ministry has been in this church. When I started, Steve, another cis, straight, white man, or at least I'm presuming that, he was the senior minister, and he did not wear a robe. He did not wear a stole. He did not have people call him Reverend Steve. And I followed suit. At some point during the interim, after you called me as senior, our last interim, Eric and I discussed what we should wear. So this is an even more in-depth, behind-the-scenes thing. So in some churches, ministers wear a robe and a stole. In some churches, they just wear a stole. And in some churches, they don't. They just wear sort of professional clothing. You may not know this from this church. I'm looking because they're getting the blue screen of death over on the stream. So online people, if you're still with us, God bless you. We're going to restream this at the 11:30 service. Or we may not, depending on their faces. For those of you in person, we'll keep going. But you may not know this, but like 60 to 70% of Unitarian Universalist clergy are women or not male. And many of them will wear a robe, insist on wearing a robe every single Sunday, both to stop getting comments on what they're wearing or what they look like, but also because sometimes it elevates the ministerial authority from the pulpit. Either way, my intention was when we brought in the new ministers, this is before Reverend Chris joined us, if we were doing no stole and no robe and stole, and whoever the new minister was wanted to robe and stole, that would be 2 steps up, and that might have been too jarring for you as a congregation. Does that make sense? So we decided to go sort of mid-level of just stole with professional clothes, and then whatever the new minister's preference was, we could go up a level or down a level. That reading you heard earlier was from the Reverend Cheryl M. Walker. Most recently, she was president of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association. She's an African-American lesbian from New York who is serving in Wilmington, Delaware. And that essay was from a book called Centering, which is about Unitarian Universalism and the experiences of people of color in our faith. This next part and the entire sermon has the blessing of Reverend Chris. So while I am talking about it while he's away, because it might be a little awkward while he was here, it's more a circumstance of the Sunday than it is anything else. When Reverend Chris got here, he requested that you call him Reverend Chris. We never had a discussion from the pulpit about why that might need to be the case. We were also intentional about mostly because we wanted the immediate experience of your ministry with him was not to be a you need to do. And I think we finally address it from congregational life and not the assistant ministry position. So for those who are newer, I was the assistant minister, and then the associate minister, and then the senior minister. Often through my assistant or associate ministry, I would have people say things like, oh, you're the junior pastor, or you're the minister in training, or one day you'll be good enough to be a real minister. Now, I get it because I've heard my sermons why someone would say that, but I didn't want the title to denote that. And I also did not want your second minister to bring on any of those assumptions. I wanted someone who was going to be out in public fully respected as often I was fine, but it was just enough of those weird little comments that I felt like sometimes I wasn't able to sort of own my authority. Does that make sense? Yeah? No? Okay. So I have never been incredibly concerned with what you call me. A lot of that is simply baseline privilege. And what I mean by that is rarely do you or the community at large try to undermine my authority. Rarely do I hear, well, men aren't really ministers, they're too emotional, for example. I've never had someone treat me like the hired help. People assume power and they defer it to me. So let me be clear that this church has been great with your respect of Reverend Chris. While any human institution will have human flaws, and this is ultimately his story to tell, this is not a senior minister admonishment of the way this congregation has been. I have watched sermon that clergy of various marginalized identities have given to their congregations, demanding that they give them respect. And you have been excellent at respecting the professionalism of both of your ministers. I bring this up today because we have not officially talked about it from the pulpit. I have watched Reverend Chris pastor with you, and frankly, he has some of the strongest ministerial skills I've seen a colleague have, but I've seen him do this ministerial work with you, and then halfway through have to interrupt to ask you to call him a different name because someone has called him Chris instead of Reverend Chris. And it feels to me like when I, as a vegan, am working on a really complex recipe, one that I'm excited about making right now. For some reason, I have a glut of green bell peppers, and I'm really excited about replicating the stuffed bell peppers my grandma used to make, which has like Parmesan cheese and like ground meat in it. And not the gross vegan kinds that are like fava beans with like sprinklings of flaxseed and no flavor, but like that kind of like junk bell pepper, that I had when I was a kid that was like more flavor than health. Anyway, so as I'm going through and experimenting with these recipes and trying to go in depth on it, and some person will then say to me, hang on, you don't eat ground beef. And then I have to stop the whole process and say, well, actually, I found a brand of fake meat that I can use, and the way I replicate Parmesan cheese is this way. And sometimes the other person gets defensive towards me and starts asking me why I need to eat that way, or why don't I know what I'm putting in my body. And then I have to stop the entire process and explain to them what I eat. All of this is to say that I have to interrupt my going deep because someone else questions my identity and my understanding of my own diet. It's the same when someone misnames us in any setting. So the thing we are doing as a congregation has never been done before. There are very few Black Unitarian Universalist ministers. While this is a predominantly white denomination, it has never been an all-white denomination. And while there are very few Black Unitarian Universalist ministers, there are fewer Black-out gay Unitarian Universalist ministers who are also 1/8 Chinese and serving in Louisiana. It's true. Because this church has done such a good job, it often is not needed to be said, but the pressure on this working out is profound. In other words, if this church can show that blackness, and I'm not just talking about his understanding of blackness, but I'm talking about the theologies that his being your minister gives permission to exist. If this can work out here with a church that has done a lot of work understanding race, in a church that is located in a majority Black city, despite what the Supreme Court of Louisiana just said, by the way. But I wrote this sermon before the Supreme Court did that, and so we'll have to save that for later. In a church that is a healthy system, if we can do the work here, then we can be a model for elsewhere in this faith, which has forever struggled with supporting ministers of color. So this is not saying we've done something wrong. This is a request and an official explanation of part of the request. Does that make sense? Good. Let's sing again. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. But here's the thing that Lee does not want you to know. You can stand if your body lets you. Lee rewrote some of the words to this hymn, and I think it's phenomenal. Okay, judging by the face, let's sing. But these are not Lee's words. We've always sang these words, and they've never been changed. Good? Let's sing.
Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing with grace. All the beauty all around us, call calls for songs of loudest praise. Now our hearts are filled with gladness, and our songs rise to the skies as our voices join together. Earth and sky sing in reply. Here I raise my hand for comfort, joining all those in distress. Friends and family gather round me, hold me through the wilderness. Friends who found me when a stranger, wandering cold and all alone, may their grace and gentle loving call me home where I belong. May our love then be a beacon shining for the world to see. If the light of love is in us, may that light shine out through me. Come thou hope of every vision, call us all to join as one. All I hope by some good measure safely to arrive at home.
About a year after I started my journey toward LGBTQ plus affirming theology, I began deeply wrestling with how my own transgender identity intersected with my faith. One afternoon, as I set up in my favorite coffee shop for a time of prayer and devotionals, I found myself drawn to the story of Jacob wrestling with God in Genesis 32. After Jacob wrestles with God, refusing to let go until he is blessed, God responds, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." I found myself in awe that God named Israel as a mark of his new identity and ongoing wrestling, and I silently prayed a simple prayer. God, if you had a new name for me, what would it be? It was not that I particularly expected a response. It was a childlike prayer from a deep, unexpressed place in my soul. To my surprise, I heard a reply, "You are my song. You are my melody." For the next 2 years, countless people in my non-affirming charismatic church, people to whom I had never told this story, prayed his name over me or prophesied something like, "God is giving you a new melody to sing." When it came time to pick a new name, I chose to include melody in recognition of my wrestling partnership with God in becoming the woman I am today.
So I'd like to talk about grief for a second. Grief is the process we go through when we acknowledge the death of something or someone. And then we get to know the new life without the thing or the person anymore. From time to time, it's gotten less over the decades, but when I counsel someone who is just come out or considering coming out, I remind them that they have known their sexual or gender identity for years. But for the people who they are coming out to, this may be the first day or the first month they are thinking about it. It takes time for people to grieve. My parents grieved pretty hard, I bet, when I told them that I was going to be a vegetarian when I was 14 years old. They probably grieved for everything that was lost in that declaration. For about 2 months, my mom insisted I eat an omelet every day, which is too many eggs. If you've never eaten an omelet a day for 2 months, I think your body then learns to reject eggs for forever, but I digress. Over time, my parents have let die the me who ate meat and got to know the first vegetarian and then the vegan me. And yes, it has robbed them of some of the things they could do, places they could eat, recipes they could share. But it has also forced them to go to new restaurants, to watch me learn to cook, to have me cook for them, to share things I'm learning with them. I want to share with them because they let me be who I am. This is the part of the sermon that's really about name and gender identity. We have church members of varying genders. Some are male, some are female, some float between male and female, some do I not identify with a gender. Because we have different people with different gendered identities in this church, and because sometimes those gender identities change based on how the world is, I am asking you to be mindful of each other's genders. There's an entire discussion about whether or not there are two genders, but you should know throughout the history of the cultures of the world, there have always been people with more than two genders, and there have always been fluid people. The best advice I heard about misgendering someone, if you do it on accident, treat it like a burp. You had dinner and then you accidentally burp, you simply say sorry and you move on. You do not do it again like 20 or 30 times. And once you've made the mistake, you don't give a long diatribe about your intentions about digesting the food and what you actually think about the food and how you actually didn't mean to disrespect the cook and how maybe it's not really your fault at all that they made such gassy food. Well, you don't. You just say, excuse me, and you move on. I know that it is hard to have people who do not fit the expectations we project onto them. I know that it is hard if you are a parent or a grandparent to let the person you are responsible for claim new identities. My spiritual request of this congregation is to embrace radical preemptive hospitality. Make it so that a boy who identifies as a boy but wears a dress can still be a boy. Make it so that someone who sees you, who you see as a man and wears a suit and dates women but identifies as a woman or as non-binary, just let them be that. Do your grief work so you don't force the person coming out to you to do it for you. In a state so afraid of people being who they are that they're willing to ban books and shut down libraries and shut down schools instead of allowing people to have their own agency over their bodies and what names they choose to be called, if we can work it out in this church, imagine what we can do for this world. Once again, this is also not a calling out of this church. This is a naming a thing that is existing in the world, and I want us to be intentional and work on it. So please let this church be the laboratory where we can figure out how to listen for people's identities, how to affirm their identities, how to let them exist both with their identities and beyond it, so that we can take that learning into the rest of the world and show through our example how we could do it, and that people having names is not scary. Let's sing our next hymn. Let's go ahead and stand. This is the hymn of the month. We'll still do this hymn, but this is the last time we're doing it this month.
When the waters are deep, friends carry me over. When I cry in my sleep, love calls me home. Time ferry me down the river, friends carry me safely over. Life lend me on my journey, love call me home. When the waters are cold, friends carry me over. When I'm losing my hold, love call me home. Time ferry me down the river, friends carry me safely over. Life lead me on my journey, love call me home. When I can cannot swim. Friends, carry me over. Open your arms, take me in. Love, call me home. Time, ferry me down the river. Friends, carry me safely over. Life, tend me on my journey. Love, call me home. Take the gift that I bring. Friends, carry me over. Deep within me I sing. Love, call me home. Time, ferry me down the river. Friends, carry me safely over. Life, tend me on my journey. Love, call me home. Life offers a chance. Friends, carry me over. Time cannot its chance. Love, call me home. Time, ferry me down the river. Friends, carry me safely over. Life, tend me on my journey. Love, call me home.
One of the pieces of the story, let me also stop here. Next week is our flower ceremony, so bring a flower if you have one, and we're going to do a whole ritual with it. We'll have flowers for you if you forget, but next week bring a flower. Online people, get a flower. One of the pieces of the story of Jacob wrestling with God, probably God, that I left out is the part where his hip is injured. As I'm sure many Unitarian Universalists know, it is hard to be you out in the world. It is hard to have a love for all people and to hear toxic perspectives on race and gender and theology. It is painful to watch vote after vote after vote go for corporate interest or go for the lowest common denominator or the most divisive ideology. Because sometimes wrestling with God, wrestling with questions of the ultimate, wrestling with who you truly are, wrestling with the things that we value most deeply in a world that may not be ready for them, that can hurt us. It can be painful, it can be stressful, it can be exhausting. When you experience someone naming themselves, you are meeting someone who has wrestled with God. Let's not make that harder on people by not calling them what they ask. Church is a place where human beings can be fully human. And that means we make mistakes. And that means we step on each other's toes. And that means our understanding of the world can collide with each other and it can hurt. So I am quoting Cornel West, who's quoting someone else who I can't remember. But this needs to be a church where when we fail better the next time. This needs to be a fail better church. And I do want you to hear very loud and clear that I am not bringing these things today because there was a problem. This is the kindest, most generous church that I know. And you do it in a world that makes it incredibly hard. I'm bringing it to you today because it hasn't been a major problem yet. And I wanted to use this, all of us are terminal, right? This is a minister where I have one paragraph left. I'm like, oh, whatever, let's bring up death again. We're all terminal. It is so much better to talk about what you want to happen with your death long before that's a reality. It's less painful for you and for your family. It's good to do the work before you need to do the work. Does that make sense? All right, now back to the thing. We are trying to create an environment here where people can truly be themselves, where they can share their wrestlings with God and the injuries they receive from it. So I ask us as a religious people to have our hearts wide open to the divine that people are trying to share with us. Amen. Let's sing. I invite you to rise one more time.
Keep your heart wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your arms wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your arms wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your eyes wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your eyes wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your love wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your love wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your heart wide open, though the waves want to push you around. Keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground.
As you go out this week, know that the world is better because you are here. Let's make this world even better. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.